Ukraine is located on the cultural fault line of the Eurasian steppe in the west. It was born at the meeting point of the east and west. For thousands of years, it has always been the gateway to Europe. The history of Ukraine as a national state is actually not very long. But the land where today, Ukraine stands has witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires over 2,000 years. It has experienced multiple changes in world order. Today, conflict happening in Ukraine will undoubtedly affect the future global landscape. So how did Ukraine gradually get to where it is now, and what kind of future awaits it? Ukraine is a region composed of grasslands, mountains and forests. It is located north of the Black Sea, which was called Euxenos Pontos by ancient Greeks. Around 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals who hunted mammoths became the earliest human settlers in this area. Around 5000 BC, another group of early humans settled here and created the Cucuteni, Tripilia culture. From the 7th to 6th centuries BC, Crimea and the northern coast of the Black Sea came into the view of ancient Greeks who began colonizing this region, establishing cities like Sinope, Pantikapaeon, Chersosus, Theodosia, etc. In the 5th century BC, the area north of the Black Sea became the territory of the powerful Iranian nomadic tribe Scythians. By the 1st century BC, when Romans took over the Greek colonies on the northern coast of the Black Sea, this region fell under another Iranian tribal confederation called Sarmatians. It is clear that Ukraine is located at the edge of the Western world civilization and right in between Western civilization and Eastern nomadic civilization. So for the next 2,000 years or so, the land where today, Ukraine stands can be summed up with one sentence: sitting on a wall where East meets West, being pulled back and forth by two hands from both sides. Let's take a look at this long history together. In the 4th century AD, as the Roman Empire weakened, large numbers of nomadic tribes from the north and east migrated into Europe, ultimately leading to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. These nomadic tribes, like Goths and Huns, initially used Ukraine as their stepping stone for invading Europe. So during this dramatic period, Ukraine played an important role. However, these tribes were all fleeting visitors who left soon after arriving. Only one tribe refused to leave when pushed by migration waves: Slavs. The Slavs are a tribal group of the Indo-European language family that entered Europe from the east between 7000 and 3000 BC and settled in Eastern Europe. Over the next few thousand years, the Slavs lived rather quietly without showing any ambition to establish an empire. But as some tribes migrated, they gradually split into three groups: East Slavs, West Slavs, and South Slavs. In the 6th century AD, for reasons unknown, the South Slavs suddenly became active and joined the power struggles in Eastern Europe. Those who have watched my Byzantine Empire history video should know that the Byzantine Empire or Eastern Roman Empire was an empire spanning the entire Middle Ages due to its strategic location at the intersection of Asia, Europe and Africa. It was constantly invaded by enemies from all directions, including South Slavs invading from the north. However, among all these enemies, the South Slavs were undoubtedly the weakest. The other enemies like Persians, Arabs or Turks had established large empires and were formidable fighting nations. Only loosely organized South Slavs were easily handled by Byzantines, who only managed to establish a short-lived Bulgarian kingdom in the 6th century. West Slavs fared even worse, briefly establishing a tribal confederation called Samo's Duchy under their leader Samo. But East Slavs were the weakest of all. It wasn't until the 9th century that an East Slav-dominated state formed around Kiev, known as Kievan Rus. However, this state was established by Vikings rather than East Slavs themselves between the 8th and 11th centuries. The rise and fall of Kievan Rus coincided with the Viking era. When Vikings were at their peak, Kievan Rus was founded. When the Viking Age ended, Kievan Rus fell to the Mongol invader in 1240. From these historical events we can see that Slavs, especially East Slavs, have never been a self-reliant or formidable fighting nation. Today, main ethnic groups of Ukraine and Russia are East Slavs, so when people talk about the Slavic warrior race, it's actually baseless. After Mongols launched their area of effect attack on Eurasia, today's Eastern Europe and Russian territories became independent principalities under Mongol rule. The territory where today's Ukraine stands was under the jurisdiction of Poland and Lithuania. Life in these principalities under Mongol rule was relatively peaceful until 1476, when a prince suddenly declared himself Tsar without paying tribute to Mongols anymore. This person was Ivan III, Grand Prince of Moscow. It must be said that Ivan III indeed had some skills, as he not only gained independence from Mongols, but also annexed several other principalities and expanded his territory. He even destroyed the Golden Horde, a state established by Mongols in this region in 1502, so he was called Ivan the Great. From then on, Ivan the Great founded this Muscovy Tsardom, which we call Tsarist Russia for short. It began to expand frantically outward and gradually evolved into the Russia of today. So how did Ukraine become the Ukraine we know now? As we mentioned before, Ukraine sits right on the edge between the Eastern and Western worlds. So when Eastern Muscovy rose to power, it began to contest this region with the Western Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth. Let's call it the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth for short. This uniquely favored land once again became the stage for the old drama of being pulled back and forth between Eastern and Western forces. Initially, Tsarist Russia had the upper hand in this tug-tin of tin-fawned war, grabbing a large chunk of territory from the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth. But in the late 16th century, the situation changed when a tribe of East Slavic people known as the Cossacks rose to prominence. We mentioned earlier that the East Slavs were not particularly formidable fighters, but the Cossacks were an exception. With the Cossack power on their side, the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth suddenly perked up again. In 1618 they marched all the way to Moscow and took back the lands that Tsarist Russia had seized later. The Cossacks even put up a brave fight against the mighty Ottoman army, defending the Commonwealth's territory. Repan's World Tivine famous painting depicts the Cossacks writing a mocking letter to the Ottoman Sultan. But although the Cossacks were formidable fighters, they were a double-edged sword for the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth. If mishandled, they could cut their own hand. And the Commonwealth indeed mishandled them. In 1648, having failed to obtain the political rights they wanted from the Commonwealth government, the Cossacks rebelled, broke away from the Commonwealth, and established a Cossack hetmanate in what is now Ukraine. Coincidentally, around the same time, thanks to a map drawn by a French engineer, people began to use the term Ukraine to refer to this region. So by now, you've probably guessed it. This Cossack hetmanate was actually the embryonic form of today's Ukraine. That is why, after the Russo-Ukrainian War began, the Ukrainian army mimicked that famous painting to write a letter to Putin, comparing themselves to the Cossacks. But historically, the Cossack hetmanate had always been a vassal state of Tsarist Russia. As Tsarist Russia grew stronger, the hetmanate was abolished by Catherine the Great in 1746 and turned into a province under Russian rule. From then on, Tsarist Russia began to assimilate the Ukrainian region with harsh centralized policies, banning the Ukrainian language and all Ukrainian cultural activities. However, humans are a naturally rebellious lot. Often the harder you press, the more they resist. Perhaps the Chinese are an exception. So Tsarist Russia's policies did not assimilate Ukraine. Instead, they increasingly aroused Ukrainian resistance and spurred them to seek to preserve their national identity. Thus, in the 19th century, as national independence movements surged across the world, Ukrainian intellectuals also sprang into action, launching a wave of systematic research and promotion of their own culture. The most representative figure was Taras Shevchenko, regarded as a symbol of the Ukrainian national revival, and his literary works are considered the foundation of modern Ukrainian literature and even the modern Ukrainian language. Although most of these resistance figures suffered constant persecution, lived in exile, and died young, their ideas had a profound impact on later national movements. Finally, the opportunity for independence came. In 1917, the February Revolution in Russia overthrew the Tsarist regime, and Ukraine immediately seized the moment to establish a central council and declare the creation of the Ukrainian People's Republic. However, this newborn regime was never able to control the entire country. Within days, it was overthrown by the Red Army. Later, Ukraine tried to ally with Poland to fight the Red Army but lost again. Under various pressures, Ukraine could no longer maintain its independence, and so joined the Soviet Union in 1922. Yet after joining the USSR, Ukraine suffered terribly. In 1932–1933, due to Stalin's policy of agricultural collectivization, a terrible famine, the Holodomor, broke out in Ukraine. According to statistics, approximately 2.4 to 7.5 million Ukrainians died in this purely man-made disaster, and that wasn't the end of it. In 1941, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Ukraine became a main battlefield, leading to further devastation. Although after the war Ukraine's membership in the United Nations was recognized and its territory increased by 15%, Ukraine lost over 7 million people, 700 towns, 28,000 villages, and 80% of its industrial and agricultural equipment. Of the remaining 36 million people, 10 million were displaced, making Ukraine one of the biggest victims of the war. So after World War II, underground nationalist movements in Ukraine revived, with countless people yearning for independence. Finally, in late 1991, the Soviet edifice collapsed and all 12 constituent republics became independent. Ukraine officially became a sovereign state. Incidentally, in Ukraine's independence referendum, 90% of voters supported independence, a clear sign of how unpopular the USSR was. The rest of the story is familiar to us. After breaking away from the USSR, Ukraine once again became the stage for the old drama of being pulled between Eastern and Western forces. In the 2004 presidential election, the pro-Putin Russian candidate Viktor Yanukovych committed electoral fraud, sparking mass protests and the Orange Revolution. Under pressure, the Supreme Court annulled the election results and ordered a referendum on the 26th of December that year, ultimately bringing the pro-Putin Western Viktor Yushchenko to the presidency. Unexpectedly, a decade later, in 2014, Viktor Yanukovych, who had finally been elected president, continued to stubbornly refuse to sign an agreement with the EU and instead tried to establish closer ties with Russia. This move once again sparked large-scale protests from Ukrainians, leading to the Revolution of Dignity. Eventually, Viktor Yanukovych was removed from power. Russia then sent troops to annex Crimea and stirred up pro-Russian forces in the Donbas region, initiating armed rebellions against the Ukrainian government, escalating tensions between Ukraine and Russia. Ultimately, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, triggering the world's attention, grabbing Russo-Ukrainian war. Even before Ukraine formed as a nation-state, this land had been the focal point of tug-of war between Eastern and Western forces. So after Ukraine became a nation-state, due to this ongoing pull, war breaking out almost seemed inevitable.